it's just been a disaster on every level. So the human first approach is recognizing that, human beings need purpose, that they need, structure, they need community, and giving them that so they can heal and grow and thrive.
This hour, we're going to spend some time talking about homelessness. This is an issue that from time to time we do talk about, either in terms of personal ministry. We've had Ron Hall on talking about the kind of ministry you can have with a homeless shelter, some kind as different as me. Of course, we sometimes are quoting from some of the policy recommendations that come from people like Christopher Rufo on one side or Michael Schellenberger on another. This is our booklet that I've done about 2 years ago, A Biblical Point of View on Homelessness. And it is an issue that we certainly believe we should address as Christians. And that's why I'm just thrilled to bring our next guest to the microphone. Michele Steeb is the founder of the Free Up Foundation. You'll have information about that. You might be familiar with her book, which is entitled Answers Behind the Red Door, Battling the Homeless Epidemic. That was based on her many years as CEO of Northern California's largest and most comprehensive program for homeless women and children. She is an individual that also has served as the visiting fellow to Fix Homelessness Initiative with the Discovery Institute here in the state of Texas. As I've mentioned, we have, of course, the Texas Public Policy Institute. She's been involved with that as well. Interestingly enough, appointed by back then California Governor Jerry Brown to the state's Prison Industry Authority to help replicate her transitional model for women exiting prison. If you have watched some of the TV shows, Dr. Phil, for example, or I just recently watched some of the clips from her presentation at the Pepperdine School of Public Policy. She brings a lot of experience, and we have not only information about her, but I posted at least one of her articles, Why Progressives Fail Homeless Americans and Attacked Effective Alternatives. Michele, welcome to Point of View.
Well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to our discussion, and thank you for that comprehensive introduction.
Well, let me, if I can, have you fill in the details, because we are familiar with you, but I think some people that don't live in the state of California, and most of our listeners are in 22 or 23 other states, don't necessarily know what you've been doing there. But can you give us some background? Because in some respects, you've been trying to bring some common sense solutions to this vexing problem of homelessness.
Yeah, you can call them common sense, and you can call them, frontline recommendations, right? I served 13 years on the front lines in Northern California's largest program for homeless women and children, built it from a 30-day emergency shelter for about 100 women and children to a very comprehensive 12 to 18-month program that helps these women become primary providers for their families, meaning working, earning income, managing their mental illness and their addictions, and becoming sober, so that they could, run their households much more effectively and their lives much more effectively. So it's not just, common sense solutions, it's frontline solutions, having done this for so many years with thousands of women and children. What's really, the reason I wrote the piece and which was really about the president's executive order, recent executive order, which finally addresses the fact that our homeless policy has failed the country in the last 12 years and has resulted in a 35% increase in homelessness. Why he declared we needed a new approach is because he recognized this current approach, its failure, and in particular, it's ignoring the underlying and accompanying issues of homelessness, which are often mental illness and addiction.
Right.
About 80% of the homeless population struggle with those issues. And as a country, starting in 2013, under the Obama administration, we said, you know what, we're not going to address those issues any longer. We used to address them, and we're not going to do it anymore. We're going to take all that money that we were using for mental health and addiction, and we're going to put it into housing vouchers. And when President Obama did that, he literally promised it would end homelessness in a decade. And here we are, 12 years later, at the highest point ever recorded in our nation's history, almost a 35% increase. It's failed massively. It's failed the homeless. It's failed, the public who want to be able to enjoy their parks and sidewalks as they used to be able to do. And it's just, thank God, President Trump, put a, he put a flag down and he said no more. We're going to turn the battleship in the right direction. We need to reprioritize federal funding to support mental illness and addiction treatment. We need to clear encampments, which are not places for the homeless to live. They're not places that encourage recovery and restoration. And we are now on a path to build that system. That system was largely dismantled thanks to President Obama, but now we have the opportunity with President Trump's executive order to rebuild a system that's number one goal is recovery and restoration. That should be all of our goals, and that's the goal that God has. God has a plan for us, and we should be helping human beings achieve what they were designed to achieve.
Again, if we believe that each individual is created in God's image, that is important. And going back to this comment you mentioned, Housing First became a federal policy in 2013. And so as a result, that was supposed to be the silver bullet to housing and homelessness, and it wasn't. And I think we all can see that. And back to the point you made just a minute ago, when you add up addiction, mental illness, and I would add trauma if you want to talk about people with PTSD, not far from where we are right now broadcasting. I'm in the Dallas area, but I go past homeless encampments. I go past people that are panhandling. I do see all three of those. I see individuals that are obviously addicted. You can tell that by how they look and what they are taking. You certainly see some that are maybe having some down on their luck kinds of illustrations. You have some that are shouting and obviously mental illness, but you see others that look relatively normal, but they're still out there panhandling because they've just been devastated by PTSD. Let me just mention that one of the things that we have is a link to the freeupfoundation.com. And this is something that if you're in the state of California, and I know quite a number of you are listening to KYCC right there in the Central Valley, you may already be familiar with this. But for many of the rest of you, you might say, well, this is something we ought to think about in our own community. And so then I also have information about the book. Answers Beyond the Red Door came out about 5 years ago, but if you'd still like to get a copy of the book, we've made it easy for you to be able to get it in paperback or Kindle. And then I just mentioned a minute ago the article that we've also posted, Why Progressives Fail Homeless Americans. It's just one of many articles that you can find by Michele, and all of that is available at our website at pointofview.net. And Michele, we're talking about rejecting the idea of housing first. So what you want to put in its place, and have done so, is human first and a human first framework. Can you explain what that might mean? Because in some respects, it is, I think, much more consistent with a biblical perspective, and is also has been proven to be much more effective.
Yeah, so just to provide a little context, I mentioned in 2013 we had a big policy shift to just funding housing subsidies, no longer funding mental health and drug and alcohol treatment and employment training. And that has resulted, as we discussed, in a almost 35% increase. And what we're calling for in the human first approach is looking at what human beings are struggling with, right? Sometimes the issues of mental illness and addiction precipitate homelessness. Sometimes they are a result of homelessness. But nonetheless, there are issues that have to be addressed, and they about 80% of the population is struggling with them, homeless population. So first and foremost, what the human first approach does is look at those issues. In the female population, for instance, domestic violence, the trauma
Yes.
associated with domestic violence is a huge factor in the male population largely. It is the experience of war, right? Our veterans who, experience atrocities, overseas, trying to defend our freedoms here. So we've got to look at the individual and help them understand, because a lot of times they are so sick from these diseases, and there's another disease often layered on top of mental illness and addiction called anosognosia, which is a deficit of self-awareness. So you have to, look at all of these issues, help them look at these issues, and start to address those. And yes, they need housing while they do that. But the easier way and the most cost-effective way and the most time-effective way to give them that housing is communal forms of housing, either shelters or transitional housing programs, where it's not only much easier to deliver those services and more cost-effective and time-effective, but it's also a place where they can build new support networks. As human beings, we all need support. We were not designed to be in isolation. But the irony of the housing first model is it does, in fact, that. It puts people in isolated housing units and removing them from any form of support network that all of us as human beings need.
Yes.
The housing first approach also isolates us from an intrinsic need that we all have, which is purpose. When you put someone in a subsidized house for life and you say you don't need to be sober, you don't need to work ever, you strip them from any semblance of purpose that they need to function. And it's just been a disaster on every level. So the human first approach is recognizing that, human beings need purpose, that they need, structure, they need community, and giving them that so they can heal and grow and thrive.
Again, if you're trying to deal with addiction or a variety of other mental illnesses, structure is important, sobriety is important, purpose is important. That's going to happen certainly in some kind of structured environment. And when we refer to all of homelessness as people that are unsheltered, it almost implies that it's the house issue, the housing issue. And I recognize in certain parts of the country, housing is the big issue, but it isn't the major issue. And I thought I'd hold up a book that we've talked about before. It is this book, for those of you watching online, called San Francisco. It is written by Michael Schellenberger. And here is an individual that really started out as a liberal. I guess he still would be considered that, but has a office in Berkeley and was just talking about the difficulty of just trying to go about his day-to-day activities. And as a person that used to support decriminalizing drugs and all the rest, I think he's had a movement. And I think he came to realize, and not all of the book is just on homelessness, but a good section of it is recognizing the very policies being implemented, in that case in San Francisco, or in your article, you talk about everything from Denver to Seattle. Many of these policies are really doing more harm than good, aren't they?
Absolutely. And Michael's a good friend and, a compatriot in this. And he is way more conservative than he used to be.
Yes.
Watching, these policies just unravel lives. I didn't even mention the death rate amongst the homeless population under this approach is up 77%. So, yes, it's been a massive failure. And thanks to people like Michael who, went to the streets of San Francisco, and Chris Rufo who went to the streets of Seattle and started to report on these things, and President Trump, who, quite frankly, he has a lot of issues right now going on. And we, those of us on the front lines, we care a lot, so deeply about homelessness. We weren't sure if he was going to spend the time and really invest in turning this around. And thankfully, within his first couple months, he issued that executive order. And as I said earlier, now is our time to rebuild a system that focuses on recovery and restoration, gives people purpose, and puts them on the path that God intended them to be on.
Let me just mention, too, the booklet here on homelessness. I think we have enough copies if some of you would want a copy. Certainly, we can send it to you as a PDF file, but we've got the quote from Christopher Rufo, his work at Heritage, Michael Schellenberger. I mentioned Ron Hall and Bradley, a number of others. And, of course, we would encourage people to also go to your website, freeupfoundation.com. And I thought, Michele, for just a minute, let's talk about how people can use the resources that you have, because we're broadcasting nationwide. There are a number of people that are maybe very frustrated that their city council doesn't really address the issue of homelessness or has policies that maybe are making it worse. How can they benefit from some of your experience and some of your resources on your website?
I do write a lot about this policy, and all of those writings and the podcasts and the radio interviews are available there. So, please, take the time to educate yourself, and, send me there. You can send me an email with any questions or comments you have. My book, which, by the way, I wrote, to inspire hope. I really do believe, but I believe at my core we can turn this around, and we now have the right directives to do that with the president's EO. So, but the book is really about providing the roadmap for that, through women 11 who just, came to us in the depths of despair and have risen to incredible heights in their lives and are doing so well, many of whom are homeowners in California as single mothers. So really, really, great stories there. But Free Up is also, it's a newer organization we just launched at the beginning of this year to help regions turn around their homelessness crisis using a human first framework. And you can go to freeup.com, freeupfoundation.com to learn more about that. And again, you can send me an email through that website if you're interested in speaking further.
I just mentioned too. Go to that.
Just want to leave out your listeners that that we can turn this around, and it may seem hopeless because it's gotten so much worse, but it absolutely can and needs to be turned around.
Well, first of all, thank you for being with us. Let me just mention again, it's freeupfoundation.com is on the website. And, of course, we have already posted this particular article that we've just talked about in terms of what is happening, why progressives fail homeless Americans and attack effective alternatives. Good piece there. Governor Newsom's broken promises on homelessness and helping the homeless rebuild their lives is key to America's future success. So let me just mention, Michele, that if people want to contact you, you have a contact form. There are individuals that might want to have you come and speak to their city council or maybe just engage in some kind of information. And so this will probably be the first of many opportunities to educate people about homelessness. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you again. I've appreciated all that we've talked about today, and don't forget that if you would like more information about what we're talking about, you can find it at the website pointofview.net. That's all we have for today. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Point of View Highlights.
Thanks so much for listening to today's Point of View Highlights. I'm Liberty McCarter, host of the Know Why podcast, a weekly podcast for young adults who want to know why they believe what they believe. If you have young adults in your life who would like more meaningful conversations like this, send them over to knowwhypodcast.com. And we'll see you next time on Point of View Highlights.